Welcome to the Kubernetes Book Club. Today's February 16. Today's my birthday and Mike's birthday. So we're celebrating two birthdays. Happy birthday, Mike. And we follow the code of conduct. As always, this is CNCF event. And it's the community group. Feel free to add your name into the doc for attendance. Mine there. You can put your company name or not. That's okay. It's just for folks to be aware, and if they want to reach out or something, or you're new, just put your name there if you want. Any next book, I think is what's the name? Kubernetes Enterprise Guide. We're discussing. Yeah, thank you so much, whoever did that. And I think just to buy time and see if I can get Michael, if we do that book, to buy time to decide which book and maybe get the author to join us a couple of times. Next Friday, I'll be doing Killer Coda exercises live, and we'll go and do it together and figure out like how to best do it, or maybe do an exercise in two different ways, like achieve the same goal. Because for the exam, you can do a task in two different ways and get the same result. One, and also like techniques maybe to do it faster than the other one, just to buy time. And then that would be the end of CKS. And I'm going to purchase it. I'm going to purchase both. The CKA and CKS are due for me. So I'm going to purchase both today. I'm going to buy them, just purchase them, so to be accountable, right? Like if it's purged, then I feel like I have a year, right, to take it. But mines are due, so this month. So hopefully I can get both CKS and CKA. Maybe before KubeCon, make it a goal. If somebody wants to join me in the goal, we can do something fun. Who else is taking it now? Or is going to take it? Anyone here?
I'm taking my
CK. Which one?
CCAD.
CCAD. Okay, good. That's good. And also I think they released this Istio. There's one for Istio. I think that these are not hands-on, but I think they're sensitive. Cilium, Istio, and Argo has certifications recently. If you need them or something, I don't know if Linux training has training for them. News. I think we don't have any recent big news other than 130 is going. Actually, 130 they're releasing some blog posts upstream, and then the different KCDs and KubeCon. And with that, today we are going to cover chapter 7, monitoring, logging, and runtime security, with Mike and Benjamin. I thought I put Benjamin's name here.
Oh, I'm in there.
But yeah, I'll stop sharing, and then who's first? I think Benjamin's going to cover the first section.
Mike wanted to cover Falco. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll do the Falco section. What do we got? Cool. We got about 50 minutes, so I'll do 20, 25 minutes and 20, 25 minutes for logging. So let me share my screen. Oh, geez. I got this Google Chrome thing going on here. Let me turn that on. I've got to like enable the screen sharing.
On Google Chrome?
I'm gonna have to. Okay, I have to. Well, let's see if this works.
I don't think you need to reboot. It says always.
Yeah, I don't have to reboot. So
and then for Chrome, lately is better.
Yeah, we'll do this, and then we'll go into Inception, and then we'll come over here. Now, do you guys see the screen?
Yeah, we see all us multiple times.
But you only see that. Do you see the O'Reilly now? No, you do not. Hold on.
Only browser window. You're sharing a thing.
Stop sharing. Let's do this. A window. There we go. Now, look at that. How brilliant is that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Technology frightens me. I'm not very good at it. Now I have to get to that window on my own machine. There we go. All right. So by way of introduction, my name is Mike Coleman. I am a developer advocate at Sysdig. Sysdig is a cloud and container security company, but we also have the distinction of it was our CTO and co-founder that initially wrote Falco. And so we are kind of the primary commercial entity behind it, although the project has maintainers from, and contributors from IBM and Apple and, basically all over the place. So it's, it's kind of Sysdig led a little bit, but definitely has contributions from all over the place. So I am actually I'm going to kind of, I guess I'll cover it from in here. So what Falco does is it's detection, right, for abnormal activities. And the way I describe it to people is if you go through and you do all the stuff that everybody tells you to do, you shifted left, you scanned your images, right, you scanned your developer pipeline, you did all of that stuff, you set your network policies, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about leading up to this point, all of that's great on Monday, but what happens on Tuesday? Right. So what do you know? How do you know what's going on with the containers as they are running in your environment? And what are people doing? And so, and here this talks a little bit about sort of this idea of actions taken by an attacker. And it's not just an attacker. That's a very, that is a very core use case, but it's also system administrators who take shortcuts. Right. So somebody wants to just see how something might work. So they shell into a container and they install something, and then maybe that's not something you want them to do. So you want to be alerted to that. So what Falco does is, and I'm going to actually switch to slides for this. Falco basically operates it does three things, right? It takes an input, it processes that input, and then it sends out an output. So for the input, by default, what we're doing is we're instrumenting the Linux kernel and we're capturing syscalls. Right. So the system calls, because containers are isolated Linux processes and all the system calls filter down into the Linux kernel, we can capture them at that level. And so we're capturing system calls. Then we're sending them from kernel space into user space where we process them against a rules engine. And the rules engine has about 80 default rules, which we'll talk about. And then when we're done, we send that output either to the logs or to standard out or some other endpoints. We can also take input from plugins. And I don't think that's on the exam, but it's just something to be aware of. So when we bring the rules in, we do something called filtering, right? Which is where basically we look, do we have a rule? Was a rule violated? And then when that's discovered to have happened, we can grab metadata from the system that we collect and collate, and we can formulate good output messages. And you'll see that as we move through. So that's what happens in user space. So when you see the Falco daemon running, that's what's happening there. The stuff on the left happens with the Falco driver. And so we'll talk about both those things in a second. So there's a driver that's installed, and that's what's capturing the system calls. And then there is a daemon or a daemon set, or you can actually even do it as a deployment of Falco running. You want that Falco, you need that driver on every system in your environment. So it'll get installed on every node in your cluster. And then output, like I said, standard out, system logs, HTTPS and gRPC endpoints. For the exam, I think it's just going to be about system logs, and you can just go in and look at those, and we'll do that. I'll do a little demo and show you that. So just diving in a little bit into what's actually going on under the cover. So on each node, you need to have that driver I talked about. And and so this is something that's a little different from the book now than kind of how we're doing it today. Just with I'll explain it when I do the
But for the exam, should be already installed, right? That's not to start is to use it, right?
Yeah, you just have to use it. But part of understanding how to use it, I think understanding this architecture is important. Yeah, so you shouldn't have to install it, but depending on what version they're running, it may change some of the things you want to look at, like the names that are used.
Interesting.
So we have a kernel module, or we have two different eBPF probes. In the book, it's using the kernel module. And that's probably a good way to go. When you're using like GKE though, you have to use one of the EBF probes. You can't install kernel modules on most, probably EKS as well, on most managed Kubernetes clusters. You have to use the eBPF probe. And so that writes information out to a ring buffer, and that ring buffer gets read, and that's how it gets parsed into user space. And that's where you do the rules matching. So I'm going to skip this stuff because this isn't necessarily important. So we have about 80 rules. And again, we're looking for like behavioral things. So did someone try to run a privileged container? Did somebody try to read or write to a sensitive directory in a pod or a container in a pod? Are they executing shells? Are they trying to SSH in? We have, we also have like very specific binaries that we can look for. So if somebody's running netcat, for instance, there's a rule for that. So there's all of these rules, and they basically follow this sort of format, right? So they have a name, terminal shell in container, and then they have a description. A shell has been spawned in a container. And then they have a condition. And so in this rule, so Falco rules are always binary operations, right? Is it a spawn process? Is it running in a container? Is it a shell process, right? Yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And then and or operators to do logical. And then we have that output. And those things you see there, percent username, percent user login ID, that's the enrichment. That's the metadata. And so we can pull metadata from the kernel. We can pull it from Kubernetes API server. We can pull it from the container runtime. And that's how you get this information on the screen that actually tells you what's happening. We have a priority, and then we also have some tags. Now, if you're looking at this rule, you're thinking, what does spawn process, what does container, what does shell procs mean? So shell binaries, so these are lists and macros. So a macro is a set of conditions that you are just giving a simple name to, so that you can reuse it in your code, in your rules file multiple times without having going to update it. So let's say that you have a bunch of rules that reference shell binaries, and you wanted to add a new shell to it, right? So you want to add Mike shell. Rather than having to go to every rule, you just update this list. The list is referenced in the rules, and everywhere it's referenced, it gets changed, right? Same with macros, right? So shell procs is just saying, look, if the proc.name field from the system call is in the shell binaries list, then you know that you were run and that it was a shell process that was started.
And then the user, the what we see behind there, like user.login.uid or proc.pname, what I remember is you are allowed to go to the Falco docs, and then there's a long table of like, what are the, I don't know what these are called, like the variables.
They're called, they're enrichment fields.
Enrichment fields, yeah. So you don't have to remember like the 200 field ones. You are allowed to look up the name and the definition. I think there's a table in the Falco docs.
And here, if you're studying for the CKS and you go to our documentation and you feel like something isn't clear enough for you, just hit me up on the Kubernetes Slack and I will fix the documentation for you.
Right.
Because anyway, I can do that for you. Or you can do it for yourself. Actually, you could just make a pull request. But so those enrichment fields are, they're all listed in the docs. The rules files are all up in GitHub. This one, container ID does not equal host. If you're running, so you can run Falco on a standalone host, or you could run it as a container. You could run it in a cluster. So if it's running on a standalone host and a process is started, the container ID will be host. And that's how we know whether or not it's running in a container. That's what that's meaning. And then spawn process, did we see an exec VE or an XVE at system call? So those are the rules. Now let's go back and we'll see. So we talked a little bit about this is what we kind of went through with that thing where, so Linux system calls, these things like Kubernetes activity and cloud activity, that's what's coming out of the plugins. We used to, in earlier versions of Falco, the Kubernetes audit logs was automatically installed. It's no longer automatically installed. It's a plugin, right? And so the plugins and the system calls feed up into the daemon, and the daemon has the rules, and then we can send the output out. As Benjamin notes, there is a lot of there's a lot of configuration and stuff that you could do, and you should take the time to go through the docs a little bit. We'll go through the Falco.yaml here in a second, and I'll show you some of the configuration stuff. But there is a book, and we have complimentary copies of these books, and I just realized there's a QR code for it, so I've slacked my colleague at work to see if I could get if I get the code before the end of the session, I'll put it in the chat. We can embed it in the meeting notes. We'll absolutely post it into the channel on the Kubernetes or on the book club channel, so that people can download this book and read it if they want. It's a super easy read. It's like 130 pages, and it's good. I don't think you need to read the whole thing for the CKS, but it wouldn't hurt to browse some of the sections on architectures and rules in particular. So we talked about that, we can install Falco as a binary or a daemon set. So basically, there is it's, you use apt or your favorite package manager to basically install it if you're going to do it on a host, right? So this is basically how you would install it on a host. But if you were going to install it on Kubernetes, what you want to do is
the host makes sense for, at least for a lot of orgs that I work with. The security team puts a lot of not a lot, but it puts a set of their things that they want every Linux host to have, right? They have a certain tools, and Falco may be one of those, because they don't want, like, it's a blessed image, what they call, right? It's a blessed Linux VN image. That's the one that you can use, and then install every daemon. They don't depend on like the platform team installing the daemon set, right? It's in the host with the Linux.
Yes, yeah. But if you did want to put it in Kubernetes, we have a Helm chart, right? So you can install it with Helm, and everything that you can do through Falco.yaml or from the command line, you can do in the Helm chart as well. Just something.
And the plugins are there that you can pass variables to enable.
So the plugins now
or separate Helm chart.
Yeah, they actually use. You can do them manually by updating Falco.yaml. So I can show you where that is in the Falco.yaml. We can also use a utility called Falco CTL, which I don't think we want to get into today because it's not. I don't think it's long enough to dig down. Okay. But yeah, you can use Falco CTL, or you can use the. We'll go in. I'll show you where they are in the Falco.yaml.
Okay.
But Falco CTL is sort of the thing. Now, this is one of the things where it's a little bit different. Like in my installation I've got here, which is, so let me blow this up a little bit. So if I do a grep on Falco, I'm actually running Falco with a modern.
You're sharing your terminal or something? We only see the.
Oh, shoot. Dang it. Okay. Yeah. So I was trying. Let me go do this. Let's go back here. I was sharing my terminal, so that is not working. Hold on. Let me go window here, share screen.
Yeah, as a side note, the exam doesn't fully specify what kind of installation method is being used. So just be prepared for different kinds of configurations, I guess.
Yeah, if it's a host, like look up for systemctl, right? If it's not, look for a daemon set.
Exactly.
All right, let's try this again. Okay, now it's telling me I have to quit and reopen because I stopped sharing. So that's not good. Why would it do that?
Really? Right. If you try again.
Yeah, because I left the sharing, and then now it's like, now you have to quit and reopen. Share. Don't share that. Share a Chrome tab. Share a window. This share. Okay, now it's working. Yeah. All right, but now all you're seeing is this. So, but that doesn't. It won't let me share the whole screen.
I'll record the desktop.
Yeah, can't do that. Okay, let me try this again. And it won't let me share my terminal. I can only share I can only share this tab. So anyway, that's fine. I don't want to mess with it too much, except for I won't be able to do my demos. So why don't we do this? I'm going to bounce out. Benjamin, do you want to pick it up? And then I'll bounce out, get the screen sharing fixed, and then come back in. I'll do some demos after I come back in, because I'm gonna have to restart.
Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe I can just give you some insight on the actual exam as well in the meantime.
Yep.
All right.
So I think for anyone that wants to take the exam, just be prepared to know where certain configuration files are. Let's see if I have anything in here. So maybe I can share my screen. In the meantime, hopefully I won't have the same issue. Just going back to the book. So there are usually 3 different files that I think are important for the exam. Let me see if I have them somewhere here as a list of things. So the one file that you will want to know about that Mike already mentioned is an existing default rule. I'm not quite sure if the location for where those files are defined changes per installation method. But if you were to install it, oh, Mike, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Let me just finish up my thought. I'll just wanted to mention 3 different files that are important for configuring rules or Falco itself. Maybe you can take it from there. Maybe you wanted to show this anyway.
Yep.
So those default rules are basically in this location here, etc Falco rules YAML. Those are the ones that Mike already mentioned before. And you can inspect them. I believe from my perspective, you would likely not want to touch those default rules. You will want to either redefine or add new rules in a separate file, which is this local.yaml file. And Mike can talk about the best practices here in a little bit. And one more file I wanted to mention is the general configuration rule for Falco itself. Let's see if I have it mentioned somewhere here. Maybe I don't have it in my book. But if you wanted to change the runtime behavior of Falco, there's a dedicated rule for that as well. So I'll let you take it from here, Mike.
Yeah. And Luke, I'll put a link to the slides in the GDoc note. You can absolutely get a hold of those. Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen again. So a window, and I want to share this. Okay, now can you see my terminal?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, as Benjamin was saying, so I am on a Ubuntu host, and so in the book it shows that the Falco service and systemd is called Falco, but like for me, because I'm running the modern BPF service, it's Falco modern BPF. I don't think that's going to affect you on the exam at all. It's just that depending on which driver you're running, that if they change the way they installed it, you might see something different than just Falco. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we go into etc Falco, as Benjamin mentioned, you can see here. Let's start. So falco.yaml is the configuration file. So this is where
entry point. Okay.
Yeah, so this is where you can define those rules files, right? There's the Falco rules.yaml, and in production, you don't want to touch that file because you can actually set Falco up to pull down the new rules automatically. And so, what you want to do, the best practice is in fact to go in and do Falco rules.yaml. This is a thing where it might, depending on what version, if they update to the latest version of Falco, it'll be different than what's in the book. So I have an example on that I'll show you. So this is where you do the rules. You can find the plugins. Oh, geez, that was okay. So here's the plugins. Yeah, this is where the plugins get loaded. So this is Kubernetes audit plugin. This is CloudTrail. This is JSON. And then when you below here, there's another area where you actually go in and enable them. But these are where you define them and go in and set the parameters. So each plugin will have different parameters. Probably not on the exam.
But not an exam, like the specific of these plugins.
Yeah. So let me go in. So let me switch over here. So there's actually two ways. So let me quit out of this. No. So the events get written out to Falco, so you can, or to the system logs. So somewhere in here, let me do this. I think I did that. Oh, it's with capital S. So this is this was a event I triggered earlier. I did that by doing cat/etc shadow. And so,
and that's one, like, I guess, like one of the default rules.
Yeah, it's a default rule. And so if I look at those logs again, you can see now there's another entry for just the second where sensitive file was opened by a non-trusted user. And here's where you can see those enrichment fields actually getting filled in with values. So it was an open at, the user was root, and container name was host, because I'm not in Kubernetes. I'm not on a container. I'm running on a Linux host. If I come over here and I do exec IT Alpine. So I just shelled into an Alpine container on my Linux, on my Kubernetes cluster, and I do cat/etc shadow here, right? And then I quit out. And then I look at the logs for that. Oh, I guess it did. So here it was a shell operated in same thing here, but in this one, you look at the logs of you're looking at the log of the cluster of the pod to do that, right? There's actually another way of doing it. Hold on, let me find it real fast.
So they didn't went to syslog?
They go into the Kubernetes logs for the pod.
But earlier you showed something that was going to syslog.
Right. So the difference is, sorry, I was fast about that. This is a Linux host. This is a single host running Falco. So they go to
system machines. Okay.
And then this is a GKE cluster, and they get written to the Kubernetes logs.
Daemon set. Falco
yeah,
as a daemon set.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you do a kubectl get pods-n Falco. So these are the Falco pods here. There's one running on every node. kubectl. I don't know why I do that. Get nodes. So there's 3 nodes. So there's 3 instances of Falco. Ignore this stuff up here is for an additional tool called Sidekick, which is not part of the exam, but it's part of my demo setup. So I just have it running. But these are the actual clusters here. And then I always get this format wrong. Let me look it up real fast. Docs, getting started, Kubernetes.
What are you looking for?
Oh, it's it's like the way the pods are labeled. I always get the format wrong, so it's just easier to copy and paste it. So this is another way to look at the logs.
Yep.
So that will show you all the errors across all the pods. Let me clear that. That was a mess. But it's basically, if you look at the logs and all of the pods are labeled with name equals Falco in the namespace Falco and the container Falco. Again, all of this is in the docs. So go. Yeah. So Kubernetes, it runs on each node in a daemon set. If you want to look at the logs, you can look at the logs for individual containers, or you can look at the logs aggregated through this command. This command can be found in the Falco documentation on, and let me go.
Or you can inspect the pod and pick one of the labels, or just do kubectl logs deployment, or daemon set, which will give you all the pods. Yeah.
So let me do this real quick. Just let's go through the documentation just so you see it. You see the documentation?
Yep.
So here's the stuff that I'm going to talk about one more. I'm talking about this and then one more thing real quick. So if the fastest way on the exam to find out about stuff about Kubernetes is here, getting started, try Falco on Kubernetes.
Oh, perfect.
And that's going to tell you like how to do that thing I did with Alpine. And it's going to tell you how to look at the logs and how to simulate suspicious activity and how to examine what should be running. So try Falco on Kubernetes is a good resource for the exam. And then for the rules, the basic of Falco rules, all of the stuff about the syntax and the conditions, and then overriding rules. And this is the part that might be different between the exam and the book, depending on what version they released, because in version 3.7, we changed the way you can override rules. Previously, you would just rewrite the rule. And this is what the book shows, and this still works. But previously, you would just rewrite the rule, and rules files are loaded in the order they are listed with a last write wins. So if you have the same rule defined in 2 files, the definition in the second file is the one the system is going to use. And that's why you go into the Falco YAML. It's the way those rules files are listed is very important. So if they say to modify a rule, for just example, modify it in rules.local, right? Make sure that that's loaded last.
Because last, yeah. I was going to say because it's last, not because it's called local.
Yeah, because it's second, right? Yeah. That's why. And then, but what we've done is we've changed the way we do this now. Now you don't have to rewrite the whole rule. You can use this new override feature where you basically are saying, like, for instance, in the list my programs, it used to be ls, cat, and pwd, but I want to change the rule so it's actually vi, vim, and nano, right? And so this would be the equivalent of rewriting this whole rule.
The delta. So it looks like a delta, right? Of what you're overriding.
I actually have this.
So you don't have to copy paste or just.
Right. You just have that one section. So let me go.
There's a second way of doing it, depending on the version. You said depending on the version, so you have to check which version you're working with.
Yeah, 3.7 or later. So, and I'll put this snippet in the Kubernetes book club chat, but this is the way that in the book we talk about, like, this is the rule that we care about, and we want to actually change the output message. So what we do is we redefine the whole rule. That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
The other way to do it is like this, where you say, I want to change the output. And so I'm going to redefine it here. And I want to change the alert level. And I'm going to do that here. And now I'm saying, so those the new definitions, replace the output, replace the priority. And so if they're running 3.7 or later, this is the preferred way to do it. Just
shorter syntax. And one question on the docs, if you can go back to the docs, can you toggle like the version of Falco you were working with to see in the old docs? Like a version toggle?
Yeah, let's go and look. I don't think that we have that fancy thing like where you're like, I know a lot of rules things have like, if you look at an old rules file, it'll be like, you're looking at version.
There's a version right down there. At the top right, you have a drop down for versions on the left of your.
Right here, yeah. I guess we do have that.
So double check the version that you have running, right? Check the image and the image tag, and then double check here so you're reading the right docs. Just that, I think that will be critical. If you're looking on the wrong docs for a while, looking at the newer docs, right, and the exam has the old version of Falco, you may get confused of like why overrides don't work. Well, it's because the exam is using an old version. So maybe play safe. Just duplicate it. Make sure that you don't change the rule name, right? And then that will replace any previous that rule if it was defined before it. I think that's and then changing like the output is usually the task is like, I don't want it to say this, I want it to say that, and then you need to know like how do I find the fields which is in the docs. I think we want to move to logs with Benjamin, or you have something else to show, Mike?
Yep, we're done. No, that's it. I was just double checking.
Your birthday. I don't want to stress you with more work.
No, it's good. It's good.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mike. That was pretty insightful. I knew that I wrote the book
refresh for
when
me.
those changes were coming up. So I was just on the cusp of deciding, should I go with the latest changes or should I just stick with what I had, given that was my last chapter anyway. One more side note, which I think would be useful for test takers, would be if Sysdig or whoever is currently mostly driving the Falco project could maybe talk to the certification department and maybe ask them if they could specifically spell out the version of Falco that is being tested for somewhere in the certification
curriculum
documentation. I
in
think that would be
the
super
doc.
useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they usually do it for Kubernetes in general, but given that so many other tools are involved, it would make sense for that as well.
That's
we're looking at. We also just did release official training with the Linux Foundation on Falco as well, but it's a paid course. Yeah, and I'm actually going to be recording. If you have the O'Reilly Learning Platform, I will be recording a O'Reilly training on Falco as well. I'm actually doing
very
it right
cool.
now. So
very cool.
That's awesome.
That cluster LED is going to be there also. Right.
But yeah, other than that, let me see what else was part of this chapter. So you can see basically the first couple of points is where Falco falls into place. There are two more points that I want to mention about the certification and potential questions that may come up is immutability of containers, and then the audit logging. Just a couple of words about the immutability of containers. What they may ask you about is to identify if a certain container is considered to be immutable. And I think there are a couple of things to look at. First of all, does the container image expose a shell? And you may know that from specifically like Google container images that do not necessarily come with a shell. So that is something to look out for. There's also a security context flag that you will want to know about. Usually we strive for wanting to not be able to modify the file system that the container comes with. And the way we can basically restrict this a little bit is by setting this flag here, either on the pod level or the container level. So we will want to make sure that we can potentially read from it, but not necessarily write to it. If you do need locations where we want to write files to or where we want to modify files, and I used Nginx as one example here, and you can still mount a volume. In this case, I just used a ephemeral volume, but you may want to consider other types of volumes here. And let's see what else should be mentioned in this realm. And if you do need any kind of configuration data, instead of potentially injecting environment variables or something like that, with the definition of the container image, you will likely want to inject this information with config maps or secrets. So I think just in a nutshell, what you need to understand for the exam is how to identify if a specific running container is considered to be immutable or not. Maybe they just want you to look at the existing configuration of pods and then sort them out, maybe delete them. But I wouldn't expect too many changes or too many questions in that realm. And then, as Mike mentioned, there's one more point here that falls into this last chapter or bucket, which is the configuration of audit logs within Kubernetes or Kubernetes cluster. So you may know that we can configure audit logs to capture events that may come in when we receive calls to the API server. And configuring audit logs is useful if you want to track if certain things change in your Kubernetes cluster as a way to observe configuration changes maybe, or if you want to observe if you potentially receive calls that should not be received, for example, from an attacker. And it's actually relatively easy to configure those audit logs.
Or I was going to interject another use case, and this is from work. is for upgrades. We have a feature where I work. I think everybody knows where I work, where we use the audit logs to inspect who's making a call that they shouldn't, because it's a deprecated API. So it will give you the list of like you planning to upgrade this cluster, and this API is going to remove in the next version, but somebody's using that API. So the minute you upgrade the cluster, whoever's using that API, could be a controller, right? Something that you have installed inside the cluster or something outside, it's going to break the application in production. So you need that. The audit logs give you that information. And also the other thing that it gives you is the user agent. Whatever is the HTTP client calling your API, then you can know like who is using the old API or who's calling my cluster for security reasons, but also like audit of like, yeah, Istio version something in the user agent, very old version is talking to the API, or kubectl or Argo, like Jenkins, like, or you want to have your custom user agent when you call the API, then you can know in the audit logs who's calling it, like, and then from the user agent have like telemetry or tracking. So I just wanted to integrate those use cases, which I found very useful when it comes into audit logs. I think that's more part of the CKA, not CKS, but the user agent, you can know like who's calling you, like you said.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good comment. I would say like audit logging, I could potentially actually see either in the CKA or the CKS. We talked about that before. So it's, I would say, a task that an administrator would usually perform, because you will have to reconfigure the API server, or like at least touch the configuration file. I think, Carlos, you brought that up before. Sometimes certain topics could fall into each of those certification programs. But yeah, on a high level, where can we write those audit logs to? Option number one is you write it to a file. And then the other option, probably more the production readiness option, is to send it to some sort of webhook, to some sort of backend. And it can bring in some commercial products here. Carlos, if you want to talk about some maybe commercial products that you have been working with, let us know.
Yeah, in AWS is CloudWatch. It's a if you use managed Kubernetes, like CKS, if it's self-managed, then you have the opportunity to send them to Datadog or external something. But in EKS, they're CloudWatch, and then you can export them to S3 object storage for long retention. Because they're audit logs, right? Like by nature, your audit process or whatever retention of logs, you have to retain it for 1 year, 3 years, whatever is your use case.
Nice. Yeah, but centrally where you configure audit logging is in a so-called audit policy file that is in the form of a YAML file. And within this audit policy file, this could look as such. You can basically capture certain types of events, I guess, and how they should be logged. There's usually a log level, which you can see here in this table. So it kind of depends on what kind of information you want to capture. If you just want to know about the meta information, it can just capture that. But you can see that we can also capture the request body as well as the response body, or both.
Also, how much budget do you have to for paying for storage for these logs?
Yeah, exactly. Keep in mind, if you actually go with this level,
everything is
a lot of output that you will capture with each event that you actually receive. And I would say, like, for the exam, just understand those different kinds of levels for this file. So you may either want to set it up from scratch, or you may want to add additional rules here. The documentation in Kubernetes is actually pretty good about that. So if you look at this, it gives you a couple of examples, more examples than actually provided in my book. So I would suggest, if you're planning to take the exam, have a look at this documentation page.
Yeah. One thing that I will say about this, take a deeper look into this configuration. You can show it again. because you see the keyword rules. So we were talking about in Farco about rules of being overriding and being run in a certain order. Same happens here. The processing a request, it goes in rules. This is an array. So it's an order. So it's going to process on this. If it matches the next one, they match. And then eventually the last one is like, if nothing matches this, then I want to log at least this information. And usually if you can scroll down to the bottom one, I think it's metadata or something like that. Yeah, metadata. Wow, I have a photo memory. It's metadata, right? So that's how it actually works. Like people want to understand how this file works. It's like it's a rule, like the same thing as Farco of like you're doing a match of like this input coming in until like if there's a match, then it gets processed. The next one don't get processed. But if nothing, then the last one is the catch-all rule, like I said there. I think I'm mansplaining a little bit, but just for people, at least for me, it was useful to wrap my head when I was trying to understand what these sections mean, and they're tied together. It's an array.
Exactly. You can actually see it here by those little dashes. So what else? I think how do we actually assign this audit policy file? By just placing it somewhere in the file system doesn't really do anything. You will have to configure the API server to consume it. And there's a flag that you will have to assign here, audit policy file, which points to that file that we just talked about. But the changes you will have to make are in this file here. That is the configuration file of your API server. Let's see what else.
Sending the logs, right? Where do we send them?
Yep. And here's one more example for, first of all, that is how it would look like for pointing it to the configuration file. And then we said we can have different kinds of backends. I would assume that likely for the exam, you just have to write it to a file. That would be this option, but there are also separate options for sending it to a remote backend, for example, Datadog and things like that. For writing it to a file, it's important that you also make this available as a volume. Here's one example for it.
Yeah, this is
yeah, go ahead.
The API. Yeah, I was going to say this is if the API server is running as a pod, right?
Exactly.
And usually in the exam it works like scan clusters. I was going to say in other setups, you run an API server not as a pod, right? It's a binary that you run, and you have to make sure about the free space of disk, right? That this thing would. I don't think there's a rule. It's not a rolling log, right? This thing keeps writing. I'm trying to remember.
This is configurable. Let me see.
I think there's an option to configure how the retention, the rolling.
Yeah, there's something in here. Maybe you can find it in here.
I don't think this will be a question on the exam, but knowing how to configure the file itself, right, and then enabling the logging and then sending the logs and inspecting that log, you can check that the log actually happened and trigger. That will be the skills that will be measured for the CKS.
Yeah, you can see some of those options here.
There's the option.
Truncation and things like that. Yeah, that's really all there is for the audit logging. I mean, you can easily assume that you'll probably spend, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes on, like, if a question on this would come up, to edit the policy file, first of all, and then also assigning the policy file, plus potentially adding any additional kind of configuration to the API server. So yeah, a lot of editing involved, actually, if that were to come up as one example. And I think, yeah, that's roughly it. And this is bucket. You can see it's actually 20% of the overall total score. So make sure that you understand Falco and specifically also audit logging.
Decision process, threat, physical infrastructure. I don't know why they put like physical.
Yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes they spell out certain points here, specifically in the CKS, that somewhat goes beyond what you would have to understand for Kubernetes. I would say this is more traditional sysadmin kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like bullet number. Not sorry if you the folks writing this don't take it hard, but I love bullet number 3. Detect all phases of attack, regardless where it occurs and how it spreads. That could be anything, right? Like
I know. You may have noticed that in my book, I don't really go too deeply
might as
into
well
that
say like secure. Make
like
sure
so
you know
wide.
how to secure a cluster.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much.
Very cannot be more vague.
Yeah, I mean,
Again,
I don't know
sorry
if
for
any
the
one of you has a direct contact to whoever's writing up the outline for this for the certification in general.
I thought there was another place where they provided more information than this, or is not. Maybe I'm
I
dreaming
mean,
things.
like let's see if we have something here.
Or maybe it's all the content around the books, the courses, right, from the different uh, leaders that are doing like these courses. Like they take the exam and then try to remember what's covered without exposing what is inside the exam, but teaching the specifics. But
Yeah, maybe in the candidate
like on the
handbook.
handbook.
Let's see if we have something here specifically about the CKS. So here it actually says how many questions we can expect. It's usually a range. It's not one specific number. But I don't think they talk much about the curriculum at all. They tell you about the environment and things like that, but I think that's pretty much it. So if anyone knows the actual direct contact within the certification department of the CNCF, I'd love to talk to them just to give some additional feedback.
Okay, I think chat may know, or I can also ask around the CNCF. I'll give you a contact. Cool. They can reach out. Because I think chat also provided some feedback to them.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'd love to provide some feedback as well.
And they have I think they have a course, right? Also, I remember taking that course. And there was something covered. I cannot remember right now that it's not covered here, but maybe was removed. But yeah, your book is the CKS study guide. Just to end, it was, I really enjoyed that. Was short, and it was kind of like, at least for me, it was good for me because it was a refresh of like that topic. Like it was not like teaching the whole thing or like why or the background or like that depth. It's like, oh, it's a refresh, and this thing will come, like it's a good refresh if somebody's going to take it, or if they took a long course and they're about to take it, just do the short read. Not saying that it's a very short read, but like it to refresh like end to end using the book. I found it very useful. I don't know if before we end, Sevi and others want to give feedback on the book before we end.
Yeah,
I think this is the last chapter.
I really would love to. Yeah, I really liked the book as well because I liked the storytelling part to it, like the scenarios which we might end up seeing in production environments. And I just CKS has I haven't taken CKS, but it's always seemed a bit more difficult than the others to me. But now I feel like I have the confidence to actually just go in and test myself. I really like the book. It's just not overwhelming. Also, it's like quite, I think, applicable to real world environments as well. Some CKD content sometimes feels like it's just too theoretical or like not towards real world scenarios. But this was, I think
a
bit more. Yeah. This was a bit more leaning towards the real world, scenarios and cases we might end up seeing.
Chat is saying that there's a link on the support page.
Oh, great!
There's a Jira ticket system that they have. Okay.
Good. Do you happen to be in Paris, Benjamin? For
unfortunately, this time I'm not going to be, but I will very much likely be in Utah if you come in there. in coming up in November.
Maybe the book club, if we can get a book club space again in Utah, maybe
Yeah, I'd love to.
might consider a book signing, or I don't know, getting together with the attendees of the book club and the KubeCon.
Yeah, I'm sure Chad would be interested in that as well.
Yeah, if anyone's going to be in KubeCon Paris, like look for Sevi, Chad, and me. We have the stickers of the Kubernetes book club.
Yeah.
I finally got them.
Look for me juggling books.
And yeah, and Chad would sign books.
Yeah, and once the time comes, I can talk to Riley again. I'm sure they'll have a booth again, at least here in North America. And they usually give away like 20 books or so as part of a book signing.
Great.
Yeah, we did that for the last KubeCon in Chicago.
Mhm.
And I believe this was the book that I actually gave away.
Maybe we could talk to O'Reilly as well, Carlos, to have, I don't know, something like a co-event. I don't know. Maybe, they would support us in that matter.
Yeah, that sounds a good idea. Actually, yes. So I think we're top of the hour. Sevi, I think for next week, and whoever wants to join, we need to decide what book we're going to read next. But I think next week, I think it will be useful for at least for me if we like do live Caracoda, like Killer Coda. Now it's Killer Coda, right? People are not new to, they don't know what Caracoda is, but Killer Coda. The CKS scenarios that are there, and just do them with the desktop. I sign up for the Plus, so I can. That's free content, right? They should not be problem sharing that. It's not killer.sh, and just go over, like, try to get them all done and see if we can do them, and people can like in the chat tell us like what is the solution, and we just do them together.
Another book done, Carlos.
Yes, so many. I was showing earlier, like all the books that we have done.
We should collect some ideas for the next one.
Yeah, what should be a theme? Just before people want to shout out a theme that they want.
With KubeCon is coming up. Like before KubeCon, would people be interested in and on a specific topic?
I was mentioning. I think you joined late. I was mentioning this book from Mark Bushstein. I met him in a KCD Washington that I did, and he said that he released second edition, I think last week or something, and they did a revamp of like. It covers a lot of things of end-to-end in enterprise. So this could be a book that we can do. You have 14 chapters if we want to be busy for 14 weeks or 8 weeks to cover this, and then maybe ask him to, if he wants to cover a couple of weeks as the book author, I can reach out to him, because it covers a lot of things that I'm doing lately, like Argo CD, platform engineering, gatekeeper, RBAC, external DNS, load balancers, security.
Big book.
It's a big book, right? I think I have a copy of the first edition, but I didn't get to it like other books.
It's like 4 inches thick. I've seen it.
Sorry?
It's like 4 inches thick. I've seen it.
You sign it, right? It's like a telephone book.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was wondering if we should go over the sessions of KubeCon in right before that happens, but that not everyone's joining it, so it might not make sense. I don't know.
Yeah, we can do it like after KubeCon. We can do a recap. Also, we can take a Friday to recap of like what good sessions to watch into YouTube when they're done. But yeah, let's decide on the book. Also, anyone is aware of recent books being released? But I'll put a couple on the Slack. But I was just wondering if people has a preference on a topic like Cilium. Does Cilium has a book? We haven't done Cilium, like deep dive on Cilium.
Me and Benjamin want to do the platform engineering on Kubernetes book.
Oh yeah, that Mauricio's.
Yeah.
We started it, right? Remember, I don't know if you were here. But then he was changing all the content to make it more
Yeah.
new. So I also mentioned this one. We can do this one. I think I can convince Mauricio to come a couple of weeks in and discuss it. And this one definitely is not like the Bible, like Mark's. Not saying that Mark is better. But yeah, I already bought this one
Easier to digest for sure.
But it covers the same thing that I'm doing the platform engineering stuff in AWS. So cross-plane, covers cross-plane, Istio, a little bit of Knative, Argo rollouts. But yeah, we can decide on this. I'll post it in the Slack. People want to do it, we go with this one.
Yeah, we
if
can
you've already
try it, give another try to it. Why not?
So I'll reach out to Mauricio, telling him that now that he finished the book, we're going to do it again, see if he wants to join. Okay, well, thank you everyone for sticking around. Thank you, Benjamin. This and also you've been the second chat was the first one to convince to do actually like host the session. So super grateful for that. For you to be the author of the book and also investing time here talking about your book that you spent many hours writing. I guess.
Thank you so much. That was fun. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always great to have the author in the room to just share ideas and definitely talk.
Yeah, and definitely if you haven't seen it in the group chat here, if you have any feedback, suggestions, improvements, let me know. Maybe a second edition will come up at some point.
Oh, great. Yeah, we have to keep it up to date. Yeah, and thank you, Mike. You're still around for joining today, talking about Falco. Very cool. So yeah, we'll see you around, folks. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week. I think we'll do some exercises, and then we can start with the platform engineering. So keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks all.
See ya.
Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Bye.